Hello and welcome to Everyday Oral Surgery. This is your host, Dr. Grant Stucki. I am an oral and maxillofacial surgeon practicing in Denver, Colorado. The goal of this podcast is to connect, learn, and inspire. In this podcast, you'll be hearing from OMS surgeons all over the globe discussing ways to improve the practice of oral and maxillofacial surgery. Most information shared in this podcast will be based on personal experience and opinions, so please supplement what you learn here with approved research studies. Without further ado, please enjoy today's episode. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Everyday Oral Surgery. Today I am with Dr. Rick Akin. He's an oral maxillofacial surgeon practicing in Louisiana. Rick, thank you for joining us again on the podcast.
Oh man, it's great being here, and I really love this topic today. It's something that when we initially talked about doing this, it really prompted me to look a little closer at patient interactions and maybe how it can help us I don't know, connect quicker, and I think that's the big thing for us here.
Yeah, for sure. Because we all spend our careers talking to people, hearing their stories, empathizing with their pain, their issues. So we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about those human interactions, the humor that's there, some of the more profound things that are there. So maybe you could kick us off on this topic. Where does your mind go when you think about some of this stuff?
The main place is that I've identified with bringing a little levity into these situations is that, and I think it's like the number one message that we'll probably be talking about here, and that is the opportunity to compress time. Um, as I've done reading on this, I mean, my background, I don't know if I had mentioned that before, but I went to a liberal arts college, and there was a mentor of mine that was in college, and we stayed in touch all these years, and he was a behavioral psychologist, and he was the kind of guy that, when you get those professors you remember, you have a few from college and from residency and from dental school that are, stand out. Well, I was lucky enough to have met mine my first year, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was, so I decided, and then I met him, took a class of his, which was just an intro to psychology. And he was just grabbed me, like his vigor, I guess, and he had written a number of textbooks on behavioral psychology. Again, he's retired. He retired about 7 years ago, and we stay in touch, email and talking at least once or twice a year now. And anyway, so that really started my whole interest in behavior and behavioral psychology, because really I wanted to kind of please him. Like he's the kind of, like those professors and those docs that you have that you want to emulate. And
Yes.
so I started diving deep into behavior, and the different, and so I wanted to be, I was a psychology major, and I really was going to go and do a master's and a PhD in cognitive behavioral. And, but I had a biology major, and then, I kind of took a year off, and I'll tell you, that year I took off, not knowing that I was even going to go to dental school, was my first interaction with real people, and the first time I realized that humor can help you in your life. I'd always loved, those people that you look forward to being with. Yep. Those people, right? I mean, come on, yeah. It's going to be, there's going to be something witty. There's going to be something fun to talk about. They're going to leave you with a little memory. Well, I had a couple of friends on my swim team in college that were like that, and one of them is still my friend, and one of the funniest guys I know. And I'd always try to keep up with him, if I could, with wit, but I was never as good as him. And but I was a waiter for a year. I waited tables at it's like this is in Providence, Rhode Island, and it was like a gourmet. It was like kind of like it was not upscale at all, but they really spent a lot of time with their food, Mexican restaurant. And I started just realizing that, of course, when you have alcohol involved and you're serving people margaritas a lot, and there creates levity, and it makes it much easier, to connect with people. And that's where I started realizing that, first of all, there were some areas I like to work more than others. Back then there was a smoking section, and the smokers and the drinkers were they had this just way about them. I still can't. Well, I can quantify it because they were always the ones that tipped the best. And it was easy for me to. I don't know. They just I don't know. It was easy to connect, and then I started. Really, I honed those skills with real people for that year that I was staying in Rhode Island, and before I even thought about dental school or to the DAT or anything. Um, and really, I look back, and that's kind of where a lot of this kind of started, was being in the service industry, because there's some research out there about that there about servers in general, and the ones that do the best. And
Huh.
and if you really look at it, it really has to do with um, I think that one of the things I read, which was interesting, is that people that kind of can squat down a little bit and kind of get more eye level with you,
Yeah.
sometimes that can help. I've read that, I know maybe we've had people that have sat down and on the table with us, it's a little bit too much, you know what I mean? And they're really, really, but there's something in between that, and it's that this friendly openness, and you're coming to their table with arms open and welcoming, and creating a little levity when you have a moment to be with them. Really, I mean, look, it's so weird how things play out, but now it plays out every single day in every patient interaction. And if I can't get it, I'm a little disappointed, um, because I know that is the jump starter of a relationship.
Yes.
And our challenge is that as oral surgeons, first of all, I mean, people don't want to go to any of the specialists. I don't blame them, and that's one of the things we joke about sometimes. I'm like, oh, I really don't want to be here. It's like, you know what? I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't want to be there either. And so I say it just like that. I said, you know what? I'm so glad you're here. I know that and a lot of times people have a little bit of shame when they come in, because they've actually had a guy that came in last week, and he had really, he kept his referral form crumbled up. Like, I don't know how. I said, how did you find this? And this is actually a wonderful doctor I worked with who had passed away 3 years ago. And he'd referred him to me, and it made me think about this guy who was just so special to me, and so many people, actually special to my dad too, who was an oral surgeon. And he comes in, he shows it to me. I mean, I'm almost got like a little, like, just to remind me about this guy. And I hadn't thought about him in a few years. And to see his name written out on this referral, I was like, gosh, this is great. But it was 3 years old. And I could see in his face, it was like, kind of this shamefulness, kind of like, I should have done this so long ago. And I was like, hey, man, don't worry about it. I would have put it off too. You're not in pain. But these are things
Yeah.
are fixable,
Mhm.
And so it's, those little opportunities for connection are what accelerate the trust. I mean, this is our problem, right? It's to
Yeah.
establish trust. When we're getting ready to do something invasive, we need to be really good and quick at establishing trust and transferring empathy. I mean, that's the key, right? Is because once we get a little trust and we get a little empathy, it's the relationship just blossoms, and then that's what we need to present treatment and then to, I mean, really, it helps with outcomes. I mean, there's neurobiology involved here. When I started looking at this, when we initially talked about doing this, there really aren't any I mean, there are neurobiologic studies on what humor does in healthcare settings. There's not a lot of it, but physiologically, who knows? We don't know what's happening. But you're changing the neurobiology, and I think, and I believe this too, and I'm sure you've seen this play out, is when the neurobiology of trust, when you've got that trust and empathy together, and you have a complication, um, the patient feels a connection, feels that connection, and will continue to feel that connection because you've set that. I don't know exactly even how to put it, but it's kind of like I had this um, during COVID times. Everybody hates to hear COVID stories, but the one thing, I don't know about if you knew this, Grant, but during COVID, the one thing you could get is a dump truck full of dirt. Okay, so
Okay.
I decided that I was going to make I was going to make a little garden in the back, and I was going to have my son at the time, young. And literally the dirt showed up like that. It was great. Just called them up. Hey, I need this much dirt. And I did my rough calculations and they dropped off the dirt. It was like an hour later. So COVID, that's one thing that it was easy to get. And so I got basically, I have no tools. I've got this one saw that my grandpa Wilbur left to me. It was a hand saw exhausted. I'm really not a tool guy, and I got a hammer and I did buy some nails, but I basically cut up some cedar planks and made this, outline. I used rebar and tapped them in, and so I had this thing kind of rigged up pretty good. And my son was helping me. And so we're loading up wheelbarrows. He's got one of those smaller little tall shovels, little small ones, but a real one. So he felt
Yeah.
manly. I don't want to give him like a plastic shovel. I'm going to do that to the poor kid. So, but then and I'm shoveling him. So we're working, and it's kind of, father son moment, and so I'm picking up the wheelbarrow. He helped me fill it up, going up there, dumping it, coming back, and then so I'm filling it up, and then I dump it, I'm wheeling back, and he's got his pants down and he's just peeing right on the soil pile, on the pile of soil, and so I'm, imagine I'm carrying this thing of this thing of soil, and I see my son peeing on my dirt pile. I had to put it down. I'm laughing because you can't hold tension and humor at the same time. You can't do it.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
physiologically impossible. So, so I'm wheeling this, and I'm watching, and I'm just like, and he just doesn't, it's just right there. And it's just sweet, and it's innocent, and it's a moment that I'll never forget. And it made me think about this. And it's about, the stress reduction that comes from a laugh. And look, I think that some of us maybe laugh alone. It's a lot different when you're laughing alone. But if you're, but if you're laughing with people and you're patient and you're connecting there, it's like, man, it feels so good. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think because I think a lot about this, of course. I have even done a podcast, like a stand-up comedy podcast, but I'm always trying to bring humor in, and it's a little sensitive, and because we're professionals, it's kind of a high stress situation, but I kind of feel it out because I feel like there's patients that really would benefit from humor and that connection, and others that maybe think, they're a little more straight-laced and maybe that would turn them off. But most, I think, really connect when they see some real humanness in there and you're caring and you're smiling. I think that's key. And so I'm always trying to explore that. How do you bring that in a tactful way? I mean, what are your tips for people who are maybe getting started in oral surgery and not quite sure how to do that?
Well, I don't think it comes from time and practice or even confidence. It's glad you asked that, because I've really never thought of it. But now that I am, it comes from you decreasing and you letting them increase, I guess, in that dynamic, that shift. So for instance, in my first room where I do my consults, I've got a bunch of, all of our degrees, we have them all out there. We're supposed to have them all displayed and everything. And, you know, they'll say, oh man, now sometimes I'll walk in and I'll be standing up, or they'll be with a loved one, they'll be standing up and looking at the degrees, like, oh man, look at all that. And, and I'll say, oh yeah, I got those. Those are really good ones. I got in the same place my daughter got her fake ID. And look, it starts us off as a funny thing because obviously, I'm a board certified surgeon and they know who I am, but it kind of brings us down to this little bit of, it brings down that tension, and you get a smile, and you get a little breathing, and look, smiling, laughing, all that stuff. I've read some stuff that burns calories and all this stuff, but it also releases those endorphins. And the minute you get that tiny little bit and you're associated with that, that's important. But look, to your question, the most important thing with setting the tone of that first experience with your patient is what's happening in the front of your office. We all know offices we go into where the vibe, or the places that we go into where the vibe is good. There's this coffee shop that I go to, and their breakfast is good. It's like many of their prices, it's overpriced coffee. They do some unusual cool coffee stuff. The vibe is just not good. We keep going back because it's a local place, but the vibe is just every time. It's like, God. But then my other coffee shop that I've been going to for 20 years, I go out of my way for every time. In fact, I've actually had a long conversation with the owner about how he cultivates that culture. And really, it all comes, I mean, we all know it comes down to proper hiring, which we're, you know, I mean, as a solo doc, it's really hard to, have a lot of applicants and to go through this process and to vet and all this stuff, kind of like, with
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A and these other companies that have this huge market, these huge budgets for doing this, and not to mention lots of applicants. Last time I checked, there's really a deficit in people that are, people are not really charging into our offices to work, not to mention with the skill set
Yeah,
that we need. So,
sure.
but it does start in the front and, with some smiles and the vibe of the right when you get in. And it's like, and what I think is to, when you enter my reception area, there's some little things, like there's an article there's something about my photography, my grandfather's photography, my dad's photography, and then my dad was an oral surgeon. It was in one of our, those throwaway kind of things, but it's framed in there. If you want to look at that, and there's a picture of me and my dad when he was alive, when we were working together, with a little note on it. And then there's some recent pictures. We all get kind of, you just forget to go in your reception area and change out your pictures of your kids, because gosh, especially early on, they're changing so quickly. Something recent of them, maybe something that you've taken a picture of or that's important to you. And I think that the big thing is, I've got a New Yorker, all those the cartoon. You can get one for like 10 years of the cartoons that are in the New Yorker, the single page. And I just love those things, kind of like the Far Side.
Yeah.
And so what it does is it clues them into your personality type. Would I think that as a new doc, you need to get them clued into who you are, and that needs to start in the reception area. Now, multi-doctor practices, obviously, that's I can't even speak to that because it's a different thing. But maybe you have your own consult room where they sit in there and they can look around and they can see some of you and who you are, like with you and your podcast. I mean, that gives you something instantly to talk to them about,
Yeah.
and it's a connection. And look, the second most important thing for me, once they come in the vibe of the office, they're looking, and they're interacting with my staff members. I do have real plants in my office. There's a comfort feeling. It's a homey environment, and I think that helps diffuse some anxieties too. Because whenever you go most of the time to the doctor or whatever, when I had my last doctor visit a couple weeks ago, I mean, these are sterile, cold places. These are not. There's a plant over there. There's some dead plant. It's like it's hard to keep up because they have. It's harder. It's seen a lot more patients.
Yeah.
But the next thing, most important for me, is when I look at a chart before I go in the room, there's a spot and they got to fill it out and it's highlighted. Every single time they have got to fill that out. My staff knows it says hobbies. And if they don't fill it out, they're made to fill it out. Because doctors want to hear about that. No, that's the only thing I want to hear about. Literally, because what jumpstarts the talk about them being honest with you about their medical is you connecting with them and understanding them and maybe finding a commonality. Look, if some people put down enough hobbies and you've been in practice long enough, you're going to have a connection with them. And what you've done is by connecting and reading something about them, it opens the door for them maybe to ask something about you that's personal, about your history or whatever, or most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time it's one way. But even better is listening. That's where you begin your active listening. Your training. We are not trained in active listening, and I've had to train myself. I'm still terrible at it. I'm still just want to fix, like every single time. Right? It's like I want to fix. I know what's wrong. No. I want to know about you. Tell me about you. It doesn't take long. Like this is not like I'm not. I'm not a. I've cultivated my practice to where I can practice the way that I want to. That's what's great about a solo doctor. I practice exactly the way I want to, and I love it. And I'm not saying you need to have like all this time. It's about quickly developing, and that's what the whole takeaway is of this. It's to compress time down to where you've built trust. Hopefully that trust has been built by the dentist that refers to you, right? That's where the magic happens. And I tell it to the doctors and I thank them so much, the doctors that I work with, that whatever they're saying, and I have no idea, but the patients come in with great trust. And then so what that has also done is it has jump-started the relationship before they even walk in the door. And then you meet them with a few smiles at the front, with people that are in good moods too, because we have to talk about how your team approaches this, because that's where you start is your morning meeting, how you run that. Those are always like a drag, right? Energy's low, everybody's just, I mean, look, there's
Yeah.
no way around that. I'm sorry. No matter how energy you are, I need you, how much energy you got, and you got a lot of energy. It's hard to get that infectious with, 10 people in my staff room. So there are ways that we could talk about that too. There's some ways to create that levity and to create, I think, compressing time, and maybe I'll go with two. It's creating a joyful atmosphere in your office. That's the hard part. Okay, so like for new docs, creating a joyful atmosphere takes time, especially if you're in a practice where you're trying to get your personality put out there. And so really, the way to do that is to start with, getting one little ally on your side. Get that one person that can understand you, and then that can be part of bringing. I'm not saying, I mean, there should be joy in every practice, but I think that every practice has a dynamic and a flow and a feel. And if
Yeah.
it's got your feel, then you roll with that. And I think many do. I think others maybe need a little bit in that. That's where you can bring, as a new doc, bring in that little bit gently and intentionally and in an open way, and kind of win over a few people with your new style and your those little personality traits that make you special. So really this all starts, and so we need to back up, because walking in the office is important, but it's really what happens before, right? I mean, I know that there are certain patients that when they come in, we are going to have an automatic connection,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you can name them, can't you? You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Isn't it great? And aren't we lucky to have that? Because, like, referral-based practice, we have built-in trust, and we're doing things that are invasive.
Yes. That's funny you say that because just yesterday I was seeing a patient and I came in and it was a super busy day and um it was so helpful because he's the first. I sat down, how you doing? Tell me about yourself. And the first thing he said was, oh, my dentist, who is from some area of Colorado, I don't even know. And honestly, I didn't even recognize the name of his dentist, but he said, my dentist, when I told him I was going to see you, he lit up and he said, oh, that guy is a rock star and he's the best surgeon in this state and all this stuff. And so that,
Uh,
like you're saying, that primed the whole relationship. So when he came in, he had such a great attitude. It was easy to connect. It was like, I just thanked heavens for that dentist, like thank you for uh, kind of getting this whole experience ready for us because it's so helpful when they have a good attitude and someone says, "Oh yeah, I love Rick. He's the greatest. What a cool guy." And I'm sure a
mhm.
lot of that comes from your background with those referring docs and talking to them and establishing that relationship. But like you're saying, it can come back in many ways to help you with that patient relationship.
Yeah, I like the way you said that. It does make me reflect on that time factor there, because it does, for that to be a genuine, they do need to know you, and I think um, that's where cultivating relationships and culling the relationships that work best with you and the way that you work is real important, because
Yeah.
but look, we're all professionals here, so it's like, you know if if you've been practicing in town for a while and you don't know the person, but you can still say, you know, positive things about a profession,
Yes.
about you may not know the person personally, but you may know their work, and you can still talk to that, and you can still set the stage for them to have the treatment that they need done. So
Yeah.
that's a complicated topic, but I will tell you that patients, when they come from another provider, they usually come with built-in value for what we can bring, and then but also those other intangibles, I think.
Yeah. And I like the concept of just setting the whole experience and the mood and the office itself, the staff members, everything helping create that experience of connection. One quick story. The other day, I had a patient come in. There's a 90-year-old patient with dementia, and her daughter, who's 70, comes in, and this patient, she sits down, and she's not sure why she's there, and she's I mean, this woman was swearing like a sailor. Everything is BS,
Mm,
and I came in, how you doing? Well, this is BS, and okay, and she said, and look at the weather outside. The weather's BS, and this is BS that you guys want to take my tooth out, right? And like
mm,
she was just going nuts, and it was so over the top that
yeah,
like I just started to smile, right? Because
uh,
you could like you're saying, you either go to the place of like annoyance and anger or just to like this is hilarious and you start smiling. And as soon as
mhm,
I started to smile, her daughter, who was kind of standing next to her in the corner, she started smiling, and then I just said, wow, man, I just love how you just call it like it is. Like, you just come out and say it. There's no beating around the bush with you. And her daughter started cracking up and she started laughing, and like I think
yeah,
it's so much better place to go to when it's like recognizing the humor and showing that as a surgeon, because they
yeah,
expect us to be very serious and like, you know, I would think her daughter would expect me to be very angry and annoyed with a patient who's
mm.
swearing and upset, but I somehow found the humor, and that just like took the whole edge off the whole experience. Have you had experiences like that and noticed that dynamic?
Man, that's a great one. Yeah, I think I feel like that's a test. Every time that I walk into the negativity, I feel like it's a test for me to try to turn it around to something positive. And I mean, there's been a couple of times it hasn't worked, but so many times, like you said, if you just call it like you see it, I feel like that woman was testing you, and she wanted to complain, and that's her style. But she's also got a side. Everyone has, um, you can break through that. I really, really, I think, the guys that the guys that come in like this and they're just all tense and they're just, you know what I mean? They're
Yep.
in the nerve, they're nervous and they can't express it, and that's okay. What I like to do is, like, if I can finally get to something where I finally get them just to kind of put their arms down just a little bit. I know I got to win, like, and I'm not going to get a smile, maybe not, maybe, or something, or whatever. I think sometimes law enforcement, when I see, we're really close to the police station where my practice is, and oh man, those guys are just, they face like crazy things in life, you know what I mean, and a lot of terrible, and you get cynical and you don't trust, like, there's people that just don't trust, you know what I mean,
Yes.
and that's really where it comes down to, is like trying to get them to try to disarm them. And that's the same thing with with people that start off negative with, I don't want to see, I don't want to be here, and then but that opens a door to me. When somebody says they hate the dentist, or they hate, we always have that, I'd rather be anywhere else, but take that and spin it, and then what you're doing is you're not trying to tune into that. What's humorous about life, about things, is that you twist it on them. It's the punchline. It's like, um, I mean, bar jokes. It's kind of like, okay, pirate walked into a bar. He said, "Ouch." It's like things that you're turning things. Not only are you, you're setting them up. They don't even realize it, and you hope that they're setting you up for something that can be funny to diffuse their anger, or not their anger, or their, um, I don't know. I guess it's fear, and I mean, and I tell, oh, and you know what? I tell patients this all the time. I'm like, once I find out what they're really scared of, sometimes the dentist said it's right on the nerve canal. We've had that before. It's a tooth in the sinus, or things like that. And you identify that, then you can speak to that. And you can speak to, maybe you can bring in your expertise and what you've seen in the past and how you handle these things. And you're going to get a 3D scan, and so it's really opening the door to what this fear is. And then sometimes they'll just want to tell you, I had a bad experience with a pediatric dentist as a child. I've never gotten past it. Or sometimes it'll be, I really don't like being here, but now I go to the dentist and I know it's important. And then you like, okay, well, great. This person is kind of, has worked through some of this, even though they're still fearful. And then I say, this is what I tell patients. If you're not asking me questions, and you're not nervous about this a little bit, there is a problem. You know what I mean? Like, I want you to have questions. I want you to ask me. I want you to have gone to Google. I'm fine. I want them to have Chat GPT on their hand, and like, come on in and we'll talk about it. And then you can see that you're getting such this little picture of what the reality is of what we do. about what we do with our hands and our minds and connecting. And then you start with that, and then you can speak, and then embrace the whole person in that, which is their 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 story here, which is their fear and in medical history too. I mean, like when you get a little levity there, they're going to be much more forthright with you. I mean,
Yes.
and I always tell patients, I'm like, this is, I mean, I am not judging at all. I just want to know what's going on with you. Is there anything else I need to know about? And is there, so, you know, eh, that's part of it too. And that's part of the trust thing, is that, oh, I can trust this doctor with something that maybe I don't know, that maybe it's substances or something like that. And these things, and I say, well, thanks so much for sharing, because this is going to affect, how we deliver care.
Yeah.
So look, the other thing is that opening up that dialogue too. The more you can spend a little bit of time with the patient going through their medical history. There are talking points there. Some people love telling you all about their medical history, and that's great, because as you start exploring, more things come out. You know, so
I love
anyway,
that point about the hobbies and having that on there. That's just ingenious because I feel the same way. I feel like the most important thing that we've got going here, of course, it's important to look at their meds and know their history, but probably even more important for their actual experience and their healing is to connect with me. And I've only got like what, 2 or 3 minutes. I run a pretty, busy schedule, and so I'm always looking for that. And I like that aspect because I don't think we have a what's your hobbies in the medical history.
mm,
My way is to always ask because I'm always trying to get to the personal, and so I'll say, all right, after I explain what we're doing, I say, so are you going to be able to take it easy after this procedure, or what do you got going on? They'll say,
mhm,
oh, well, I have to go to work. Oh, what do you do for work? It's just trying to
mhm.
find some way. Oh, I'm going home, just going to chill. Oh, are you going to watch Netflix or shows, or what do you do for fun at home? So it's like trying to get in there, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, you watch Cobra Kai. I love Cobra Kai.
Yeah, and do you love that though too, right? Once you get that connection and it's genuinely, you want to talk about it. It's something you
Yeah.
love.
What
That's
other
really
tactics do you have, or what do you use to do that?
I like I said, I mean, look, the only thing that is highlighted on my intake form is hobbies. Literally hand highlighted. The only thing of the
Nice.
whole intake registration process is that. Like that's how important it is. So, that's one thing. I think that usually that will launch me into something, like it'll get me thinking about something. So one you made me think of was somebody, they put on they raise animals, and I said, well, what is that? I was thinking like a farmer, but no, they were involved in like large animal rescue. I said, oh, well,
Okay.
tell me about that. Like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, there's an animal refuge down. There's a place around here that's got an animal refuge, giraffes and whatnot, and many animals like that have come from zoos or whatever. And he's like, oh man, I raised this lion once, and so I was just thinking about how bizarre that is to say that you had raised and it started, yeah, I raised a lion cub, and I said, and so I kind of leaned in. I was like, so did it roar a lot? So I'm thinking this is just such a funny thing to think about. And that got us just launched into just not only a good conversation, but like a relation, a friendship, you know what I mean? And it's, and so anyway, I mean, it's typically something like that. And then look, there are people that do not fill that out. They just don't want to. It's very rare though, but occasionally, and that's where, I got to spend a little bit more time to get there. And like you said, it's kind of like some people, it's really, you have to kind of pull it out of them. And I liked what you said about afterwards, because you can use that. That's a good in right there. If you're not getting anything from them, it's like, well, tell me what you have planned, or tell me about your work and how this is going to fit in with your recovery. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you're here, they're a long haul trucker, and, and they, work two on, two off, I don't know, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or they're like a plant worker or something. So, oh yeah, well, we can squeeze that. We can do this, before you start your next shift, or, in between. It's like, oh, I'm on the road all the time. I'm like, well, look, make time for this. Figure out this is good for you, and then you can build some value for them. We'll get you back on the road in a few days, um,
Yeah.
and then you're talking as much as we can talk someone else's language. Um, we had another patient that came in, and he he's a professional, but he had dreadlocks. I mean, just awesome dreadlocks. And so. Um, we didn't really I don't think we talked about his hair that day. We didn't. But occasionally, you'll just make a comment of something. It's like, man, your hair looks really cool. Or like with you, man, your head shape looks really, really cool, on you. And I said that to a patient recently. And then it went into, guess what? It opened the door for the melanoma he had removed. And then we started talking about that. I was like, oh, tell me about that. And he showed me his incision. And guess what? We're connected. I said,
Yeah.
yeah, your shaved head looks good on you. How long have you been doing that? He's like, well, I'm doing it for a while, but I had this spot up here and I've been shaving it for like 5 years. And finally I went and had it looked at and wound up being invasive and a melanoma. And they did a excision this big and look at this. And so we started talking about his other medical history and there wasn't much, but it's a connection. But this other guy with the dreadlocks, and he's just the nicest, just generous guy. And he came back in and it was about 4 months later. And this is a tooth removal with a graft. And we're like, whoa. I was like, because I always, what I do in my reports, I always have when I send to the dentist, I've got a portrait. There are portraits on all my reports that go out and my letters or whatever. And it's good for me because it helps me remember, I always remember, we're always good with face. All of us are good with faces, right?
Yeah.
Most of us. And, having the portrait on there, and I almost never, ever forget a face over all these years in practice. Okay. But this guy, I was like, when did I see this patient? I mean, I do not remember this guy. And I'm looking back and it's like he shaved his dreadlocks. And then so I was like, man, you look so much different. He's like, yeah, I've been growing my dreadlocks out for 19 years.
Oh,
And it's
wow.
like, and then so we just started talking about that. And that was like right before surgery. So, we haven't talked about really what happens right before you go into surgery. But, there's some ways you can diffuse, Xanax or Halcyon helps a lot too. Don't get me wrong. But there's other ways that you can start off that, you can jumpstart that lowered catecholamine release.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're reducing the cortisol release when you see them at the consults, because that'll get them stressed on the way out. But catecholamines are kicking in when they're coming to see you, and the heart rate's up, and blood pressure maybe a little bit. So it got us talking about that. And so I said, so I was just curious. I'm like, did you save them? He's like, yeah, I saved all my dreadlocks. I'm like, man, that's so cool. That's so cool that you have them. And I was just kind of I could have gone lots of ways with that, but he was a little groggy. But it's just funny to think about somebody saving 19 years of hair, and I thought that was kind of cool. But I will tell you this: we've had a lot of patients where I don't know, they'll bring us stuff from themselves. I don't know, and it's like you start these little collections of different things that patients bring to you about themselves. Once you made that connection, like one guy. He was Russian and he'd been living here forever. And he'd gone back to Russia and he brought me this nesting bottle of it was a vodka nesting bottle. I don't drink, but so we've got that nesting bottle in our office that as a reminder. And then one person brought us a little crystal of a mouse. Like she loved mice and this little crystal. We have that. And so we've got all these little things. And I wasn't going to ask this guy for his dreadlocks, but it would be, it would be pretty. I don't know if that's polite or not. I don't know what the protocol is with there, but he'd probably give us one, but I wouldn't know what to do with it. And so we've got a lot of little things that remind us of these special times we have with patients. I mean, how lucky are we? How lucky are we to be able to be with people and to help them and to connect with them and to help them through this moment. And this is just a small moment in their lives, but we have that moment that um, we can make an impact. Look, I really think that even
Sure.
in those, like you're talking about, those few minutes we have, we can make an impact on humanity. I feel like that's what we're called to do. And it isn't just about everyday oral surgery, It isn't just
Yeah.
about dentistry. It isn't about, it's about the connection that we're getting with people and leaving them with something. And hopefully, and this might sound a little bit too expansive, but hopefully we're changing the universe just a little bit through that little interaction we have with that individual. And that, I mean, of course, I think it spills over into our whole lives. It's changing just little changes at a time. I'm big on, the things that I see myself being most impactful for are the micro those micro interactions. Oh, so for instance, people, when you're giving, let's say you're charitable giving, it's to me, local is really important because maybe you can better identify where the money is going to be, or you can choose, what you're going for. I mean, it still might not be the right thing because that's the problem with charity. You never know. You're given the right thing. Is it going to the right place? And all of a sudden you overthink it. But
Yeah.
but then that comes down to like, and if you don't have anything to give, but you still do, like you still got a little something in you that you can give to another person, and that's a smile. It's a little bit of an interaction. It's checking out. Like I was speaking to the fourth year dental students in professional development yesterday, and I was talking about, maybe try to go, instead of doing your self checkout, maybe go to someone that's a real person. And then, and I'll tell you, I've been a little bit frustrated with myself about trying to interact, with people that are dragged down by their job or whatever it is, and it's hard sometimes to make a connection, and sometimes it'll kind of pull at you the wrong way. So like if you go to a checkout line where, there's a guy there who's checking you out and you want to make a connection, it's just so hard to, and but you can do it. I mean, but it takes effort. It takes a
Yeah.
little bit of effort, and you got to put yourself out there. You gotta put yourself out there and say, hey, good to see you, or thanks so much for at the end, and a little bit of eye contact, just a little bit of, it's just identifying the humanity out there, and that's what all trickles down into the way we provide care, and that's where this is a bigger theme here, it's the connection. So maybe we're on to three things now to talk about, and that we really have talked about, which is, um, you know, is compressing the time we have with the patient to build trust and understand that we have empathy. And then two, it's developing a joyful atmosphere. And then three, we are connecting with through eye contact and touch and handshaking and gestures and how we even interact with the patient. Like we haven't talked about touch, but we're getting all in there, and sometimes I notice that it's better. Someone say, "Hey, I'm just going to kind of check your TMJ," and you start from the outside in. Maybe do a little neck exam. I mean, I think many of us tend to, we're busy. We want to jump on in. Well, maybe
Yeah.
you know maybe put, like sometimes it'll be like, a little, like a light touch here, or maybe a light shoulder. I remember an orthodontist when I was in ortho and as an adolescent. And this orthodontist, he was just so good at that. And he'd kind of nudge up against you and kind of, it was like a little sarcastic put. I mean, not sarcastic, because we're not talking about sarcasm. We're only talking about positive humor here. We're only talking about,
Yeah.
and not, anyway, there's so many different types of humor out there. We all know, but we're talking about build up humor. But he would kind of hit you a little bit when he'd get up to you in the chair. And it was like, I don't know, it was like, man, there's a connection there. He's kind of joking with me a little bit, guy to guy, And I've always remembered that. And of course, I don't do that. There'll be some like kids, like we'll have a connection. Like my son plays basketball, his son plays basketball, and or the kid plays basketball, and I'll kind of nudge up against him, like a guy thing. You know what I mean? And then with women, it's you just have to be real. You want to be cautious, and you want to be open, and you want to see how they, because I mean a lot of times we'll go in there with like this stuff and pull everything, it's like, no, we want to just kind of, hey, I'm just going to kind of look in here if you don't mind. Let me just kind of feel around your neck just to check here gently and check your joints and things like that, and maybe determine how, because that sets the tone for how you touch, right? Because when you go to a dentist, I remember my dentist, and when I was growing up too, he was rough. I mean, that dude, he was really, he was like, rough and tumble in there and everything. It was fine. I mean, I never had dental fear or anything, but, I'm very cognizant of how even my first injection that I give when it's, when we're starting to, a light sedation on a patient, and I'm really going slow. You know what I mean? I'm really going slow as we get started, and then you do your thing. I think that's important too, because you're setting the tone for what this experience is going to be like.
For sure. Those two things I was thinking about is kind of like the small talk aspect. I've even read books on this. There's one called the Fine Art of Small Talk. But so you have to kind of have that skill. Like for example, I'll say, "Oh, well, what are you doing after this?" "I'm going to work. What do you do for work?" I have to have like a series of questions in my mind already prepared. And then they say, "Oh, I'm a construction worker," and then my prepared question is, "Well, how do you like that? Is that a good job? Do you enjoy it?" "Oh yeah, I love it," or "It's horrible," and "Oh man, why is it horrible?" So you kind of have to go down that road, because some people just aren't taught those skills, don't have that there, and you kind of have to prepare that and think about it ahead of time. And then the second thing, like you're saying, is you have to be curious. You really have to kind of want to know, right? Like because if you're curious, and I could tell you are a super curious person, to be able to stop and go, yeah, so did the lions roar a lot? Like clearly you're interested in this, and they can sense that.
I love that. Yeah.
It's just like it's
That's
that's
good. You're right. The listening part. So yeah, that you make a really good point there. And I actually made a note about small talk in this in preparing for this, is that small talk is not BS. Small talk
right.
is an important part of humanity and connection. Look,
Yes.
look, I mean, I hate people that say I was one of them, so I could say this. That I hate small talk. I hated small talk about, talking about the weather and all this stuff with the guys at the, if there's like a sports get together with their kids or whatever. But that's what launches us into bringing down our barriers. Small
Yes,
talk.
for sure.
And it's so easy. Oh, you just said it. You don't have to read the book. Just ask a question and shut up. And that's the hard part. It's like being quiet and listening, like listening more.
Yes.
Like that would be the big take home, I think, for the new grad, new doc out there, in your oral surgery practice. I mean, get in there and just listen more. And look,
Yep.
if you're developing these skills and they're not giving you enough time in your schedule, you need a little bit more time maybe to develop these skills of listening and learning. And then, I mean, look, it's active listening, right? I mean, it's knowing, it's being present in the moment. And that's like the big, that's a theme from all societies everywhere in the world now, back then. It's being present
Yes.
in the moment. And so like, and people are always like, well, I need to be more. I mean, so frustrating. Like when you see on about meditation and all this stuff. Look, you can practice that every moment of your life, every interaction that you have, just be present there. And you don't have to go and meditate. You don't have to go and, do anything crazy. Just be like in that, be focused. Even that could even be your one thing this year. Okay. Beef every time you walk. So put a sticky note on your computer every time you get up, or outside on your door. And it's just like, whereas you're getting up to go into one of those rooms, be present with that patient. Be present with that patient. And then and it doesn't have to be, I'm talking about just a few minutes of intense, I don't know if intense is the right word, but openness and listen and presence with that person. That's where your practice will come in, and then that will pay off 5 years down the line.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it does. It's so. I'm really glad you talked about small talk because I meant to. I'm glad you're one step ahead of me, and I'm glad you're listening. Thanks for listening because that's a really big. I mean, that's a really big point. I think you know, um, I don't minimize if somebody wants to talk about the weather. I mean, what do we
Yeah.
start off with? The first thing I said to you this morning, I said it's a little, it's cool here. It's been a kind of a warm winter. That's the first thing we talked about. So
Yeah.
it plays in perfectly even to our relationship, which is really cool. So and
Another
yeah,
question
connecting. Sure.
one question I have for you is the patient who comes in, because we'll get, I don't know if you have these patients in Louisiana, but we'll get these occasionally who my assistant will come in, hey, Dr. Stuckey, this guy is just driving everyone crazy. I mean, he is just so rude. He's pissed. He's upset about the cost, everything. And we just got to get this guy out of here, and like that's what they come and tell me in my office. And then they kind of like almost prime the pump for me.
Uh,
And I could
it,
potentially like, walk in there with my hairs on end and be like, dude, you need to shut the heck up and quit. Like, I mean, how do you
it's
deal
so
with
true.
that patient who's just like a royal pain in the rear?
Oh man,
Um,
that's such a, I'm so glad you brought that up because doesn't it just drag down the whole office?
yes, it's just so
One
tough.
person can affect your whole vibe in that moment, from the moment they come in. And man, I I can't say never. There've been a couple of times where as things have stacked up and I'm just human and I'm tapped out and someone's really short with me and they don't want to be there and I'm like, why, of course I don't say why are you here, but I mean, there's all these things. So I'm so much better now about, I was like, all right, let's go talk. Let's go. I'm what that has opened with me now, maybe particularly the past 10 years, I've been practicing 20 years, past 10 years is more and more curiosity. It's
Okay.
it's I'm more curious as to see like Because many times our staff are they're very, very perceptive, you know, um,
Yeah.
and and that's great. But sometimes, you know, the handoff from the front to the back to the x-ray to my nurse, 'cause I use nurses, to the nurse, and it becomes this trickle down effect of stress. The stress,
Mhm.
well, not trickle down, but an escalation of stress until the nurse comes to me and says, and I can just see it. And they're like, they're just like drained. And they're like, because, there's people, these are people that they will drain energy.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Parasite.
And
Yeah.
yes, they're exactly. And we want to be around energy. We want to be around energy builders. That's what we want to
Hmm.
be, and especially late afternoon and Monday or Tuesday where we just so now I only go in with curiosity and I go in, I look at this, and I've never thought about this before, like actively thought about it. I go in as a challenge. I want to get to the, I want to win over this person. I want to see what's going on with them and I want to listen to them and I'm going to be present with them and I'm going to figure them out. And you know what? It doesn't always end with me being able to win the staff over to their experiences, but it has helped me understand that this patient's going to do okay here, and we're doing the right thing with them. You know what I mean? Like, because and that they trust me because that's what I need. I need the trust. Okay,
Yeah.
my staff. It's great if my staff has developed a relationship with them and all that stuff, and they're smiling and everybody gets along great and all that stuff. But I need to know that I've broken through whatever that is in them. And usually there's something, right? Usually it's something. And and those are important. Those are important. I feel like those are the most important moments we are called to break through and to understand um, maybe what's going on psychologically with the patient. Those
Yeah.
patients take longer time too. They just
For
take long
sure.
time, you know?
Yeah. I've gotten
Um,
to the point where I have to, as soon as I hear that, like, you got this patient and he's annoying everyone and he's pissed about the x-ray hurt and the time's too long and then the chair's uncomfortable. Like, and he's so angry or she. I've learned to think in my head, okay, what this tells me is this person is afraid. They have fear and they're manifesting it through anger, right? So I'm not gonna go in there and like, hey man, you better just tone this down or else we're gonna give you the boot from this. Just that just is like meeting,
mhm,
you're kind of addressing the false front. Like what the real issue here is fear. It's not anger. And so it's like that's where I go in and say, with the kid gloves or whatever, and say, hey, tell me what's going on. What are you worried about? What's happening in your life? I don't know. So I kind of go in there
yeah,
and try to purposely take that chip off. That kind of sometimes my assistants are trying to put the chip on because they have it on, and like you're saying, I could see they're drained. I could see they're frustrated, exasperated, because we all want the patients to be happy and have a good experience. But when they're not, sometimes our staff can kind of react and be like, okay, this is not fun at all.
right. I think I'm actually going to bring that up with my staff. I like what you said. It's fear manifested as anger. I love that because that will immediately, even if it's not exactly what's happening with that patient, or maybe they just had a bad day, or maybe they have the more of a bully type personality. There are these types, and that maybe they're, I don't know, but I like that. I'm gonna use that on Monday morning. Thank you, man. I'm gonna talk about that. And look, I think that we definitely get those patients become very memorable, but they're very, very few and far between,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
true.
it's very, but gosh, do they stand out because they drag, like I said, they drag down the energy, in the
Yes.
office. I mean, it's hard, it does make it harder to deliver care, especially if you're stacked up with patients, you're walking into that, you know what I mean?
We had a patient come in the other day, and this was our fourth practice. The other three practices he had been kicked out of, and they said, never come back, throw his file at him as he's walking out the door. We don't want this.
My gosh.
And he had PTSD from being in some, I don't know if it was Vietnam or, anyways, he was like a veteran, very rude and mean, yelling at everyone. And I went in there and just was smiling and happy and talking, how you doing? And he was just like, wow, you're the first doctor that's actually listened, that's smiled at
Mm-hmm.
me. And he totally calmed down. And he's like, as he's leaving, he's like, I'm gonna always find you, Dr. Stuckey, because I could tell you're one in a million. And then my staff will look at me
Mm-hmm.
and go, why are you so nice to these people? Because they're
Right.
gonna always come back and then torture us. I'm like, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Everyday Oral Surgery. For more information on these podcasts, please visit everydayoralsurgery.com. I love feedback and would be very grateful if you would reach out to me via my email, grantstucki@gmail.com, and let me know what you thought of this episode. Or you can text me at 720-441-6059. Additionally, if you have any topics you'd like to hear about, or if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please email or text me. I found many of my interviewees through people who have been contacting me and have been listening, and I've gotten so many great ideas for more podcasts, and that's what helps keep the podcast rolling. So I really appreciate you making that extra effort and helping me out with feedback and knowing what to do next on the podcast. Thank you so much.